Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we are comparing the newly released GeForce RTX 4070 with its more formal tie-wearing brother to see if the tie version, or TI version, is worth the extra $200 US, or should you just save the money and settle for the new casual wear version? Well, before I answer that question with an extensive benchmark session, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their new 12th gen CPU contact frame by DeBauer. It's well known that the integrated loading mechanism, or ILM, of the LJ1700 sockets bends 12th gen CPUs, leading to an uneven contact surface that reduces cooling performance. Solving this issue, the contact frame replaces the ILM, allowing for a much more even contact with the CPU's IHS and the base of your cooler, which in turn reduces operating temperatures. Installation's quick and easy, and thanks to the use of anodized aluminium, the contact frame is non-conductive. And then, for those of you who wish to further maximize contact, Thermal Grizzly now offers an optional lapping tool, so for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so I've got a 40 game benchmark for you, covering the 1080p, 1440p and 4K resolutions. I've included 10 titles which have been tested with and without ray tracing enabled, and then we have a number of recently released games to look at. Now, just a very brief recap on how these two products differ. The RTX 4070 uses the same 295mm square AD104 silicon as the TI model, but the L2 cache capacity has been reduced by 25% to 36 megabytes, and with that you're getting 23% fewer CUDA cores and texture mapping units, along with 20% fewer ROPs. The core boost clocks have also been reduced by 5%, but the same 12 gigabytes of 21 gigabits per second memory remains, and with a 192-bit wide memory bus, that means a bandwidth of 504 gigabytes per second. Now, justifying those downgrades is a 25% reduction in price, but at $600 US, the RTX 4070 is still around $100 more than we'd like it to be, which is a bit of a shame, but having said that, there's really no better alternative right now, besides a discounted and outgoing 6950 XT, which comes with its own cons and pros, and perhaps we'll explore them a bit later on in the video. And perhaps that's a comparison that we can do next. Let me know in the comments if you'll want to see a comparison between the 6950 XT and RTX 4070 in around 40 games with a detailed ray tracing analysis, and that's what I could do next. But for now, I think we're going to take a closer look at the RTX 4070 and 4070 Ti. For this testing, the CPU used is the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, which has been paired with the Gigabyte X670E Aorus Master, using 32GB of DDR5 6000 CL30 memory. As usual, we'll be going over the data for around a dozen of the titles tested before jumping into the big breakdown graphs, and the resolutions of interest for this one are 1080p, 1440p and 4K, so let's get into it. Starting with Cyberpunk 2077, using the high quality preset without any upscaling, we see that the 4070 is 22% slower at 1080p, 18% slower at 1440p, and 16% slower at 4K, though under these conditions you'd really only use either GPU at up to 1440p. Then, with ray tracing enabled, 1080p is really the limit for both models, at least without the aid of upscaling, and here the 4070 was 26% slower, rendering just 58 FPS, whereas the TI model was good for 78 FPS. Now, for those of you playing multiplayer games, the RTX 4070 is likely going to be better value, as it is plenty fast, and VRAM is somewhat of a non-issue here, and not that the TI model offers more VRAM anyway. At 1080p, the 4070 was just 17% slower, 20% at 1440p, and 24% at 4K. We're also using the ultra quality preset, whereas most looking for a competitive advantage will dial the quality settings down towards a more medium type preset, so you will be looking at well over 100 FPS even at 4K using the RTX 4070. A Plague Tale Requiem is a great looking game that doesn't require high frame rates to enjoy, but in any case, using the Ultra preset, that's what you'll get from either of these GPUs. Even at 1440p, where the 4070 was 18% slower than the TI version, we're still looking at 81 FPS on average. Things do get dicey at 4K, and here you will want to enable DLSS to get up over 60 FPS. The Callisto Protocol ran effortlessly on the RTX 4070 with 92 FPS at 4K using the highest quality preset without any upscaling, so although it was 19% slower than the TI model, it was a non-issue in this example. Then, with ray tracing enabled, which does break 8GB cards using these quality settings, 12GB is just enough, though you will start to run into frame time consistency issues at the 4K resolution, so at the very least upscaling will be required there. Like Call of Duty, another game where the RTX 4070 will be more than capable is Fortnite. That is assuming that you don't want to max out the visuals, which we will look at in a moment. That said, even the epic quality settings in the DirectX 11 mode's not really how you should be playing this game if you want to get those sweet victory royales, at least in anything outside of entry-level bot lobbies. And by bots, I mean actual AI bots, not novice human players. In any case, with the epic settings, the 4070 still pumped out 171 FPS at 1080p, and although that meant it was 20% slower than the 4070 Ti, using competitive quality settings, you're almost always going to be limited by your CPU. But if for some reason you want to play Fortnite for the eye candy, and admittedly the game does look pretty amazing maxed out, the extra performance of the 4070 Ti will come in very handy in that situation. The 4070 was 17% slower at 1080p, 20% slower at 1440p, and 21% slower at 4K, though both will require upscaling support to game at 4K. Resident Evil 4 has been tested using the Prioritize Graphics Quality preset, which disables ray tracing, but I also have some RT results which we'll look at in a moment. So, with ray tracing disabled, the game is a breeze on either of these GPUs. Even at 4K, the RTX 4070 was good for 66 FPS on average, but you can just about double that if you want a game at 1440p. Then, using the Max preset, which does enable ray tracing, we see that performance is reduced, but not significantly so. Certainly not like we see in a lot of other games. The 4070 does dip below 60 FPS at 4K, for example, but upscaling would get you back over that, and at 1440p we're still looking at 94 FPS, making the 4070 the typical 22% slower than the Ti model. Spider-Man Remastered is heavily CPU limited at 1080p, even with the 7800X 3D, though we are talking about more than 200 FPS, so at that point, it really doesn't matter. The 4070 was 15% slower at 1440p, but again, with 159 FPS on average, using the highest quality preset, it probably doesn't matter. You really need to play at 4K for the 4070 Ti to be worth the upgrade, as here the 4070 was 19% slower with 89 FPS on average. Now with ray tracing enabled using the second highest preset in the game, we again find that the results are heavily CPU limited in Spider-Man Remastered at 1080p, and the same is true for the 4070 Ti even at 1440p. Then at 4K, the 4070 is 15% slower than the Ti version with 82 FPS on average, so a great result overall. Moving on to F122, we're first going to test using the ultra-high preset, but with the RTFX manually disabled. This results in big frame rates, and at most the 4070 is just 19% slower than the 4070 Ti, pumping out an impressive 142 FPS at 4K. However, this is a good example of where enabling ray tracing just isn't worth the performance hit. You might do it just because at 1080p you can, I guess, but for those of you after a high refresh rate experience at 1440p, you'd surely forgo the RTFX. Then at 4K, enabling ray tracing slashed 100 FPS off the RTX 4070, so dropping it to just 45 FPS for some better shadow quality, it's simply not going to be worth it in this example. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is an excellent quality game that has been muddied by poor performance, which is a real shame. Still, if your CPU is fast enough, you can now enjoy some half-decent performance in this title with an RTX 4070 or 4070 Ti. Using the highest quality preset, the 4070 was good for 73 FPS at 1440p, making it 22% slower than the Ti model. The Last of Us Part 1 has seen numerous performance-related patches since release, and these results are based on the latest version of the game, using the maximum quality preset. The game really plays well on the RTX 4070 at 1440p, and I found aiming relatively easy at over 60 FPS, though ideally I'd be after the kind of performance we're seeing at 1080p. If you agree, you'd either have to use the high quality settings or enable upscaling. In any case, at 1440p, the 4070 was just 12% slower than the Ti model, though it was 26% slower at 4K. Okay, so here's a look at the 1080p data comparing the RTX 4070 to the 4070 Ti, and on average, we found the 4070 was just 16% slower. Of course, there are some CPU limited results here, or results from games like Death Stranding that have a 240 FPS cap, and both GPUs hit that at 1080p with the visuals maxed out. Then when we move to 1440p, we do get a better representation of how these two GPUs compare, but even here the 4070 was just 19% slower on average, which is quite good given it's 25% cheaper. We did see some margins exceed that figure though, in titles such as Hogwarts Legacy and The Division 2. Then at 4K, we again find a 19% margin despite a more consistent spread of results, removing the worst 3 results for the 4070 Ti, so CSGO, For Honor, and Rainbow Six Extraction, that only sees the margin change by 8%. So there you have it. That's how the RTX 4070 and RTX 4070 Ti compare across a massive sample of games. The question now is, which one should you buy? Should you settle for the standard RTX 4070 at $600 US? Or is it worth digging a bit deeper for the Ti model? Normally, I'd just go with whichever model delivers the kind of performance you're after. And while that still somewhat applies here, I do have a really hard time recommending you spend $800 US on a graphics card with just 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And really, that factor stings even at $600 US with this model. Had there been an option to pair the RTX 4070 with at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM, I think I'd be all over it for $600 US. And I do realize it would be a different core configuration at 16 gigabytes, but I'm merely pointing out that in 2023, that is the kind of buffer capacity I'd expect on a $600 US graphics card. The problem is, for most of you looking at upgrading, and you do have around $600 US to spend on a graphics card, it doesn't really get any better right now. With AMD yet to release a Radeon RX 7800 series product, there's simply no competition outside of last season's Radeon RX 6950 XT, which admittedly is a compelling product at the current discounted prices, but it's also an outgoing product. Stock here in Australia has almost dried up entirely, and in fact has at some retailers such as PC Case Gear, for example. So we're likely only talking about just a few weeks before the 6950 XT goes extinct entirely from retailers. As it stands, Newegg does list a few models for between $620 and $650 US, which does make them very tempting, but as I noted earlier, there are cons and pros to that option. The only real advantage of the 6950 XT is the extra 4GB of VRAM with 16GB in total, and around 15% greater rasterization performance, which admittedly are two big advantages. Still, the 6950 XT will be inferior for ray tracing performance. It of course lacks DLSS support, and frame generation isn't a thing yet. It's unclear if it ever will be for that product. And power efficiency is well down, pushing total system usage around 200 watts higher. If the RTX 4070 was selling above its MSRP, then the 6950 XT would be the more obvious choice. But at a slight discount, it's really difficult not to give Nvidia the nod here in my opinion. So I feel at $600 US, the RTX 4070 is the best option available right now. And for those of you considering spending $800 US on an upgrade to the Ti model, you really should consider the Radeon RX 7900 XT, which can be easily had for the same $800 US asking price, but it packs more VRAM, is slightly faster for raster, and generally delivers competitive ray tracing performance. Until AMD releases a true current generation competitor, the RTX 4070 will continue to go largely unchallenged at $600 US. Again, I'd hold out in the hope that Nvidia is forced to reduce prices, but if you're unwilling or unable to wait, then this is as good as it gets right now. And I hope you enjoyed this video, all the benchmarking and all the information for those of you looking at buying either one of these products, RTX 4070 or 4070 Ti. And if you did like it, you know what to do. Also subscribe for more content. I will be pitching the RTX 4070 against the old RTX 2070. I think that's a pretty interesting comparison. Not something I was able to include in our day one content due to updating all of the results and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, 2070 to 4070, will it be worth the upgrade? What are you getting there? That's something I'll be looking at later this week. And if there's any other comparisons you want to see made, maybe 6950 XT versus 4070, let me know in the comments section below, and I'll look at making that happen. Also, if you'd like to support our work more directly and get access to some pretty cool perks, for example, all of the graphs featured in this video, well, I think it's about 50 or so graphs. If you want to check all of those out in detail, then you will get access to that via Patreon or Floatplane. That goes for a lot of our big benchmark content. You'll also get access to an exclusive monthly live stream with Tim and myself, where we answer your questions live and talk about whatever's been happening that month. There's also behind the scenes content, Q&As, and an exclusive Discord server, which is a great place to hang out and talk tech. And again, Tim and myself are active in there, as well as our video editor, Balin. So pretty cool community there. But if you're not interested in any of that, then hey, that's perfectly fine. I would like to thank you for watching this video, especially if you watched it all the way to the end. Good on you. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.